I'm like, these people are.
Yeah, I was so glad.
Because I can't even get this.
I was thinking of you last night.
I can't. Let's try.
7:25 staring at the train. That's pretty.
When I fall out of his chair.
There. Okay, see, look, you got it.
I'm gonna talk to you.
Yeah, you're taller than me for sure.
I wish I could snap my fingers. I know what's going on. That's
I don't even have a. Are you on this committee? You're on this committee.
I'm on one of those.
They aren't on this committee. Who's on this committee right now?
Miss and Sean and Paul.
You're on this one though, right? Oh, good for you, PB. Of course
You
you're.
know what I mean?
You didn't have a neighborhood meeting this morning, so you could attend.
We got 3 out of 5.
Okay.
Good morning and welcome to this March 12th, 2024. Oh, that's wrong. 2025 Finance Committee meeting. I do have 3 of the 5 members, so we can have an approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? And a approval of the February 19th minutes. All in favor? Great. Whoever is presenting first on classified staff retirement benefits.
Good morning.
Morning.
Last week, when I did the strategic update for the board, it was mentioned, we mentioned as we were doing that about the PSCRS or about the supplemental retirement plan as it relates to our hourly employees. So I just want to give you some information as we go through. I think you have the slide, and I'm going to go through each one. Most common plans that you'll see that we have the Public School Retirement System of Georgia, which is PSERS, as we will, you hear that acronym, and then the TRS, which is the Teacher Retirement System of Georgia. We do have a few employees that are under another plan coming from outside into the district, and there are only about 5 of those in a different plan, but these are the primary ones that, you know, over 99.9% of our employees have. The Public School Retirement System is managed by the Retirement System of Georgia. PSERS was established in 1970 to provide supplemental retirement plan for public school employees who cannot contribute to TRS. So in 1970, this was created. It was intended to be in addition to other retirement income, such as Social Security, et cetera. It's not primary intention as compared to TRS. Members included bus drivers, school service workers, maintenance, custodial personnel, and some managers in those positions are in TRS. So some managers in those areas. Members contribute $4 per month, $10 per month if they were hired after 7/1/2012, and they contribute from September to May of each fiscal year. You can see to receive the benefit, employees must have at least 10 years of service, which is really the same as the TRS side, but 10 years of service and be age 60 for normal retirement, sorry, age 65 for normal retirement or age 60 for early retirement, but they will receive reduced benefits. Members to become vested members become vested once they earn 10 years of credible service. So that's just giving you an idea of what the PRS system is, and notice that what they receive in retirement is $17 times the total number of years. So if somebody has 20 years of service, they'd have $340 a month that they'd be getting for this. And again, it's a supplemental retirement, not primary, or at least the intent was in 1970. The difference between TRS and PSCRS, you can see on the TRS side, employees contribute 6%. On the PSCRS side, employees contribute $4 or $10, as mentioned earlier, is their contribution per pay period. And you can see TRS is a defined benefit plan. PSCRS was intended to be a supplemental retirement plan. You can see the formulas there. Just showed you, you can see the credible service on the TRS side compared to the formula on the PSCRS side, and also the normal retirement. You can retire, actually in TRS, you could be 50 years old and retire if you already worked 30 years. So it's not really an age restriction retirement as it is on the PSCRS side. You can have the early retirement options on both sides, and you can see those as well. And that's just a summary of both the TRS and PSERS. Supplemental retirement plans. On the government side, we have 403B, 457. Most commonly, people understand 401Ks that are on the private sector, but that's what we have is 403Bs and 457Bs. And they're both are tax-deferred savings plans offered to certain employees in government, public schools and government agencies, allowing employees to contribute a pre-tax portion of their check towards retirement, with the money growing tax-free until withdrawal in retirement. So that's what we have as far as our options for our current employees. TRS covered employees contribute 60%, it was mentioned earlier. And as a method to recruit, our thought process on the PSERS side is that we would have a supplemental retirement plan for the PSERS employees. As you can see down where you see the cost, we have 785 employees or positions that are totally PSERS. Those total salaries are $26 million, as you can see, 26.8 million. If we did 3% of a cost share, so employees would pay 3%, we would pay 3%, it would be $805,000, as you can see. If we did 4%, it would be around 1.1 million, and you can see how it progresses. Just as we were getting information on this, most districts that have these do 3%. Most districts that we have districts that don't pay into Social Security, which we do. So we are one of the districts that elected to pay into Social Security, and we do, which is why for us, it is truly a supplement when we think about PSERS. However, we want to go above and beyond that. And as I looked at other districts that we were able to find information on, the highest that we saw was 4.5% that another district was doing. But I wanted to provide the numbers because we don't have to be constrained by that. But I did want to just note that 3% is a common, and then give you those other numbers as you think about that. And again, that would be employees contributing on the 403B, 457B side. Now, it's not a retirement plan, it's a supplement too, so they would be able to, it has restrictions by the IRS, so we'd have to follow IRS restriction related to 403B or 457B. But that would be the general cost to the district if all employees were to elect it. Communicating with vendors about it, they said that usually about 85% of employees will elect it. One of the things we want to do is have employees opt out, not opt in. So everybody's in unless you don't want to do it, as opposed to getting in. So we want to make that something where they can just opt out of it as opposed to opting in. So they would have that benefit, in the future whenever they were to leave the district or retire, whatever the case may be. You can see the benefits of employer matching, increase retirement savings, tax advantages, compounding growth, incentives to save, and financial security in the future. Again, this would be a third supplement for them as far as, again, they would have Social Security, but then that has an age, requirement to get to that too. So all of those things are in the 60s, 65 and higher. So at least this would be something that could generate if somebody needed to retire earlier or needed to leave earlier too in the district. You can see we're proposing a dollar for dollar match of 3%. And so that was the example I gave earlier, 3, 4, 5, 6, however we want to do it. And we can decide whether, they do 3 and we do a different percentage. Certainly could do that too. Doesn't mean that they have to do a 6% percentage contribution too, because they are still contributing to PSERS at that $4 and $10, because they still are doing that as well. So we can make a determination on how we want to do that locally. And you can see if they resign after 1 year, we would want to put restrictions on them getting our portion of what we contribute. You can't just come in, get our portion and leave, so we would expect them to stay before they, at least 5 years before they could draw 100% of what we can put in for them. They could always take out what they put in, but as far as the portion that we put in, we'd expect you to be here 5 years to get 100% of what we put into the contribution. We can't go any further than that because that's actually IRS driven. So it's not like we could do 10 years if we want to, or 15 years. It's kind of 5 is kind of the limit driven by the IRS. It does appear based on what we've seen that we should have a single vendor. Right now we have 5 vendors that we manage. I can't tell you one time we used to have 9 or 10 vendors that we manage 403Bs. So, that would require something for our employees because our employees, they like who they have. We would probably allow current employees to keep who they have. It's just that when we do the district program, it would just be 1. You wouldn't have the option to go to 4 or 5. That allows us to also maximize the cost. So it would cost less for us to, because there is a cost in the companies managing it. That is a much lower cost if we have a single vendor, because now they know they have 700 or whatever the number is. And you can see we're also thinking about doing a catch-up. Catch-up is something that is allowed in many different areas for employees that are age 50 and above, and we were just thinking about maybe allowing that where they could boost their retirement savings a lot faster. So once you get 50, so between that 50 and 65, you're able to do something a little bit more aggressive, and maybe you're coming into the district at 45 or whatever. So we're thinking about that as an option as well. And then you can see we'll continue to or expand what we're doing. We're offering financial education sessions to help employees. I think that's something we need to expand anyway and do anyway. So I think we'll be doing that as well. In conclusion, just the supplemental retirement plan overview emphasizes the critical importance of planning for retirement for our employees. The goal is to highlight the significant retirement planning and resources available to help employees secure their financial future. And that's the goal of this. Any questions?
Yeah, go on to Ms. Hall.
I am ecstatic that we are making such a concrete, transparent effort to secure the financial stability of our employees. I think this will go a long way in helping us in terms of recruitment and retention.
Yes, ma'am.
I worry, of course, that we face a lot of turbulence in the current situation, but I'm hoping that once we survive that, this is something that we could actually put into place. So thank you for this
And
consideration.
we could start small. Again, it's I want to start. So it's like I said, I did the 3%, say $100,000. We can think about doing something like. I think we need to start something, and then we can decide, as we go further, what we do to expand it if we want to.
Could you tell me how much our budgetary cost is for paying into Social Security for everybody? Not that I'm trying to, just want to know what that number is.
Don't know. We have to get
We'll have to
anybody.
get back to you on that. That's a good question. We can get that number to you.
I would guess it's pretty large. And that's for every employee, correct? That's not just these 785 that are outside of TRS.
Correct. That's for every employee.
Every employee,
employee
yeah.
is in tier and Social Security. We
Yeah.
pay into.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's that portion of benefits, when we talk about benefits, that's the portion we pay locally that the state does not give us funding
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
Any other questions?
If an employee retires, like you were saying, at 50, but they're 30 years, they start collecting at 50 retirement?
Yes. For on the teacher on the TRS,
On the TRS side of the house. Okay, I'm asking more for myself than I am.
On the TRS side
I mean,
of the
the
house.
school district TRS is better than the higher ed TRS because y'all can continue to, because you can go up, you can work 50 years and get 100%.
No,
correct?
you can
Is
work
it
40 years and get 80%.
40 and 80 is where it caps? Okay, ours it
And
caps
80.
at 60%, so.
40 and 80.
Okay. Mr. Katchmark?
Appreciate this overview. I would advocate for adopting any policies that don't cost us money that are as enticing to employees as possible. So, for example, catch-up contributions don't cost us anything, but allow employees to put more money in after 50. On the flip side, there were some laws passed the last 2 years that give more flexibility to withdrawals and tax-free withdrawals.
Yeah.
Maximizing and adopting those gives employees flexibility in emergencies. And then we talked about this at the retreat, but also taking the most aggressive but legal position we can in terms of bringing back retired teachers so that it doesn't impact their TRS earnings. That gives people flexibility to stay here when they've retired and provide supplemental services here as well. So it's a package of, it's the whole package that we need to look at, not just, bits and
Agreed.
pieces of these plans.
Agreed.
And I know you all are. I just thought it worth mentioning again.
Thank you for
Thank you.
highlighting, sir. Yes, sir.
Ms. Grabowski?
Thank you for this. And just for clarification, the PSERS, so we have employees that are currently enrolled in that are not eligible for TRS, is that correct?
All 785 listed are not eligible for TRS that you saw there.
Right. But
Yeah.
are they eligible for the PSERS?
No, all 785 are in PSERS.
Okay.
They're not eligible for TRS.
They're not eligible for TRS.
We
Okay.
do have some that have the option between that are managers, so they may still be in PSERS because
Okay.
they started, let's say they started 10 years ago in PSERS and they decided not to go in TRS. We have some supervisors that are in that domain, but as far as the actual number, that 785 are the ones that can't get into TRS.
Right, okay. And just curious, I agree with you have to opt out versus opt in. Is that the way that the PSERS is currently set up? Is that an automatic?
Oh, it's automatic.
Okay.
You can't get out of PSERS, can't get out of TRS.
Can't get out of TRS, yeah, okay. I just wanted,
Yes,
I'm just less
automatic.
familiar with that one, so I just wanted to clarify. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Tanya Howard-Harrell?
Yes, good morning. I definitely, just thinking about retired teachers, I had one to approach me at a neighborhood meeting with the complaint about ESS and the pay they get for that. So I think if we can do something to recruit them, many will probably come back because they're not really satisfied with the salaries they're receiving from ESS.
And yes, I do understand that, and I could give some, it's like 10 years ago, no, I want to say about 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, we came up with a salary that was very, very high. And what happened is TRS was upset with us at the rate of pay that we had. But now we've gone beyond that, and now it's the other side of it. So yes, we need to work on those salaries, and we will. But yeah, that was a problem with TRS earlier, but I think we're good now. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else?
Moving on.
All right, thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to do a brief Finance Committee update. And for the record, I'll be so glad when my budget director comes back next month. She's been out the last couple of months, so that's why you've been seeing me. But as part of the budget process, what we try to do in the Finance Committee is bring components and bits and pieces of the budget as we're working on them, put them in front of you on the front end before we bring a preliminary or a recommended budget to the board, so you'll have all of the pieces on the front end. Instead of us giving you a budget, then you start asking questions, okay, what is this for, what is this for? We try to bring the pieces to you on the front end. The presentation today is just to briefly talk about the school staffing formula. You should have received an email with some other attachments. One is from the Georgia Department of Revenue, it's QBE earnings, just to give you an idea so you can peruse at your time how we earn positions from the state. Then you also had another attachment, which is part of what's in the presentation today, that shows the staffing formulas. And that's what we actually share with the school principals. They use those formulas. They can already calculate how many teachers and how many parapros and other type of positions they have based upon those formulas. So all we do is take the projected enrollment this part of the year, then after 10th day, we adjust it using the 10th day enrollment and calculate the number of staff that a school will earn. So as I mentioned earlier, just want to talk briefly about the methodology of how we get to the funding formulas, and I actually just briefly mentioned that. It's based upon what the funding formulas that we get from the state. I'm going to list the different types of positions that are included, and they're also included in that additional handout that you received. And the 25-26 modifications to the staffing formulas that we're looking at recommending. I do want to say up front that we're proposing some adjustments, but we're planning to pay for the adjustments from savings that we're looking at in the current budget. As I mentioned, the funding, as a base, we use the QBE funding formulas. That was one of the handouts I sent you. We modify that formula based upon state maximum class size. This is actually a part of Georgia law. We have state class size maximum limitations per type of class, per grade level, but locally we have waivers that allows us to exceed those maximum class sizes. And we do make some modifications to the funding formula based upon local facility designs. Part of the allocations may say, for instance, custodians. It may not depend on the number of students, but it may depend on the size of a facility, and not necessarily the number of the students. These are the positions, if you had a chance to look at that additional attachments that are included in the funding allocations. We call these the base allocations. Every school will earn these type of positions based upon their enrollment, except for the principals. Each school will get one principal, but every other position is based upon their enrollment. Everything except for ROTC, I do want to correct that. ROTC is driven by the federal government, not the state government, the U.S. military. They actually approve the ROTC program and approve funding. So it's actually federal funding that we get from the Defense Department. Now, as I get into the other positions, I'm not sure if Dr. Barnes has made it yet, but I may have. Oh, he's right behind me. Good timing. So I'm going to let him talk about the next few slides because they're really school-based positions, not so much to talk about the number of positions, but why we're recommending changes. Dr. Barnes.
Good morning. So on this slide, we are looking at assistant principals. The change on this slide really boils down to providing the necessary support, supervision, and directing this over schools. What we noticed that in particular our K-8 schools, some of them are on the larger end of the spectrum, and then we want to make sure that we have the necessary administrative support to be able to supervise some of the larger K-8 schools that we have. That's where we're seeing the biggest impact. In terms of our middle schools, not so much, but the high schools is where we're seeing a critical need that we need more administrative staff to support the growing needs within our high schools. Currently, we're noticing that the ratio of administrators to students and all the things that are growing with the responsibility of instructional leadership and then just the overall managerial operations of the high school is putting a strain on the current staff there. So the formula change is to allow more assistant principals to be allocated to a school in a shorter span. So let me look at high school. In high school currently, a school can potentially have 1.5 assistant principals for 486 students to 728 students. So that 0.5, we've been kind of trying to make it whole, because you can't really have a 0.5 assistant principal that has been shared between one school and another school. And so that would give, rounding that up, now we will have 2 assistant principals for an actual student enrollment span of 501 students to 750 students, which is more of a manageable caseload of having 2 assistant principals in a school that size. Any questions for assistant principals? Yes.
Ms.
Well,
Grabowski and then Ms. Hall.
I'm
And
just
then I've
trying
got
to-
questions if they don't hit mine.
I'm just trying to reconcile the presentation with with the PDF that we received.
Okay.
And maybe this is a after the meeting question, but so the assistant principals are highlighted in yellow, there's text in black and text in red, and the numbers aren't matching.
That
What's
could
in
be
the
a typo
presentation?
on my behalf on the presentation. The red should be the current formula. What's in black should be what we're
being
going to.
proposed? Okay, yeah, we'll probably need to,
Yeah,
not
I'll
sure they're
double check
matching,
that.
so we just need to,
Yeah, I'll double check that before, and we'll send the
Okay.
correct version
Okay.
back out.
okay, thank you.
What is on the slide, is that correct?
Is this okay, if what's in the slide is correct, then that's fine. Okay.
My question is more, Mr. Barnes, about the job descriptions of the assistant principals. I was very fortunate when I was an assistant principal in Beaufort County. We had there were two of us, and the gentleman who was there with me didn't want to have anything to do with the instructional side of things. He wanted to do total discipline. And of course, I felt just the opposite if that was possible. So we were able to work that out in that instance. But generally, what I found, and I felt it was unfortunate, is that so many times assistant principals are relegated to discipline. They
Correct.
don't get to participate in the instructional life of the school, and I think that's poor training on our part for those who want to go on to be principals. So is there something in the job description? Do you go into it saying, this is an assistant principal who will deal with all the discipline at Groves? This is a position where you will deal with the instruction. Is it?
No, ma'am.
It's not.
No,
You're
ma'am.
just, it's the luck of the draw of what the principal wants. How's that determine what your job description is at this school, so it's not totally different from what is at another school?
Right, you're absolutely correct. And the first and primary thing that we want administrators to do is be instructional leaders in the buildings that they're serving in. And the overall management of that building is what we want to make sure the student culture becomes stronger so that instructional leadership can rise to the top. To answer your question, the principals actually assign assistant principals specific duties, and what we ask our principals, what we ask our principals to do is, as you are assigning your duties, if your assistant principal is the AP over grades 9 and 11, or in an alpha scenario, they are responsible for the instructional leadership of those particular assignment areas, as well as the overall supervision and management and the discipline of the students. So they have a balanced caseload, and it's not put all onto one particular person. Now, the reason we ask that is just as you say, it is not necessarily fair. And so if we think about developing a leadership pipeline, as we need to replace and fill principalship positions, because of retirements and things of that nature, we can't have assistant principals applying for principalships who are not strong instructional leaders. Now, this is definitely an area of continued growth. As you know, I'm new on board, so I haven't had a chance to assess every assistant principal and their responsibilities. But moving forward, that is the vision that we want to have for our assistant principals, is to be instructional leaders and walk side by side with principals and giving high-quality teacher feedback based off student data and their observations as to how we would improve the overall teaching and learning within our schools.
Dr. Briggs, can I just ask him one other question? What about people who are excellent in terms of managing discipline who aren't necessarily assistant principals? I know we just created some deans of students. I never really knew what the dean of students was to do, but is it possible to create positions where I'm very good at discipline, and that's what I need to do? I don't need to be involved in the instructional side, as opposed to it always being the assistant principal.
Yes, ma'am. So that is the primary purpose of a dean of students, is to
Oh, okay.
is to actually monitor the overall student culture. Every school does not have a dean of students.
And why is that?
And
They don't need one?
No, I can't say they don't need one, but what's the allocation for dean of students? We don't have an allocation. It might be a created position. based off of FTEs, like I think, administrators can do in exchange for it. But that is definitely, now, every school doesn't necessarily need a dean of students. I want to be clear on that. But
I'd love to know which ones don't.
but there are some schools that do have a need for a dean of students, and sometimes two deans of students, along with a couple hall monitors as well, and school support officers. School security officers. So yes, in an ideal utopia, that is the total package to help manage student culture and also to build student efficacy. It helps shape, a more safe environment, inclusive environment, where assistant principals and principals then can really focus on what's most important, and that is teaching and learning.
Okay, I'd love to know how the rest of you feel.
Is there an industry standard? Like, is there a, okay.
The only industry standard is for the
For
principal.
this right here, is there, is there a industry standard of allocation, like there, the National Counselors Association says this is the goal? They at least give something.
No.
There's not a national standard, but I've seen a few districts that's pretty on par.
Okay.
Yeah, this is that standard.
Do we have metrics that say that one AP at K-8 for 600 and 2 for 1125 is not working, because we have in the current an allocation formula for 1 and for 2 and for 3 and for 4. Easy to me would be just delete the 1.5s, and the 1 is for up to 600. If we thought that 2 prior was good up to 1125, then 2 is good up to 1125. 3 was good previously up to 1350. Is there some measurable reasoning for the change in the allocation? And I'm looking right at the same thing that we've been doing on all of our programmatic funding, looking at it from an inventory side of the house. Is this program making a difference? And I know that we're working. I know that y'all have had tons of meetings to say, here's how we're now going to evaluate if iReady is worth however much that contract is every year. For me to think that we should continue to add APs, deans of students, to change the metrics for how we allocate those, there needs to be a difference. There needs to be some measurement. If we have that dean of students that is for behavior, okay, we have data on how many incidents there were. Is there a reduction? And a reduction that actually equates not just a 1 or 2 reduction, but a reduction that actually equates to a full-time salaried position at that school. Or if we add an AP or some other administrative person at that school to make some other change, is there a measurable point that we can look at as a board to say that made a difference, that position should stay there? I don't want to attach people to the positions. I want to just discuss it as a position. I do like that you're saying that some schools have different climates, so I think we should definitely look at not just everybody gets an allocation, because that definitely doesn't work. But if we're going to have these positions, and if we're going to change how we allocate the positions, there has to be something attached to the position that, and I know I'm asking for, we're building this so that it doesn't even have to have, I think, as many conversations moving forward if it's data-driven, because then you could say that school was allocated last year 3 APs, and the third AP was for behavior, and nothing changed in the amount of referrals, in the amount of ISSs, the amount of OSSs, nothing changed. Then we as a district and we as a board need to look at that and go, that position did not make a change. Was it the person? And now I'm not in that. That's y'all. That's not us. Or was that the position just isn't going to make the change? So instead of just saying, hey, we can change some stuff for the sake of change and add positions for the sake of adding positions. I really would like measurable reasons for those positions to exist and to be added, rather than just somebody saying, we need this position. I know that's a big ask, but I feel
No.
like there are ways to get
It's
that
not a-
number.
It's not a big ask. I agree with you that we do not look at a metric to measure the impact that adding these positions have on a school. You're using the example of discipline, which is one aspect, one very singular aspect of what an assistant principal does. Assistant principals also return parent phone calls. They support teachers in coaching when instructional matters. They attend ball games after school to support supervision. So we would really have to look and try to isolate how do we determine the effectiveness, because effectiveness of an assistant principal is much, much more than just a discipline metric. You know, how quickly are parent phone calls being returned when there's an issue? How quickly is a substitute teacher or a new teacher being oriented to a school? If we relegate all of that to the principal, or there's not enough administrative support, you could look at a school becoming inefficient in many ways. I agree with you, it's not impossible. It's not an impossible thing to do, but it would take us some time to think about that. And I would just add that we don't do that for any position. You're getting ready to hear about adding some counselors. We don't look at a metric to measure the effectiveness of a counselor when we add counselors. So there are many positions that we add and take away from a school, but we don't have a metric necessarily to measure the impact. So again, it's not impossible. It would just take us really sitting down, and it would be a significant culture shift across our district if that is what we intend to do, because it could mean, in some cases, we don't keep people in certain positions. So it also boils down to an evaluation metric, right? And then how does that bubble up to other positions in the district, coaches? You know, we're not measuring things like that yet.
So thank you for taking it outside of me using a singular point and understanding that there is a ton of other things. And this isn't going to be solved today.
Right.
But I would like to have a bigger conversation on some way to look at effectiveness.
I agree.
And I don't want it to be a hit or miss and you're done, but it shouldn't just be, you're in that position and you're in it.
Right.
So there are smarter people raising their hands. So I don't know who was first.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Okay, Dr. Howard Hall. We'll just go from left to right. Everybody okay with that? Dr. Howard Hall.
Okay, when you look at enrollment, we look at the what. What is the enrollment? So we have to take a deep dive to say who is in the enrollment. What is the percentage of your ESOL students? What percentage are SPED students? What percentage are that have a high discipline referral population? Lack of parental engagement population, retentions, the graduation rate. There's a neighboring county that high school has 8 APs, and they're assigned. You're AP of ninth grade academy. You're AP of RTI. You're AP of, you know, it's outlined. It's just not a vague, you're the AP. They have specialties that they specialize in. So I think that we do need, some schools need more APs than others, not just by the enrollment number, but the need within that enrollment. They need more.
This is, and we don't have this yet. We are working on, the next phase of this is the differentiation. So we will be looking at the complexity of a school, to your point. How, you know, what is the free and reduced lunch population? What is the number of special ed students? That adds additional work, and all schools are not created equal. That is not what this is. This is our base formula, but the differentiation piece is coming. We are trying to come up with the comprehensive plan of what we're going to do for our high priority schools, which would include the differentiation piece. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you. I agree with what Mr. Brinkman said about evaluation, just so far as let's make sure we have the right leadership for the right populations, that we have selected that wisely before just adding more leadership positions. But in deep diving last night, after getting some of this information, I referred to our last Malden and Jenkins external audit. And I noticed that in the last 10 years, so 2015, our cost per student was roughly $10,000. Our cost per student in that book, or in our budget book from 24-25, was now $19,700 to $20,000 per student. That is a gigantic jump. I compared it to the comp counties that the state generally uses for us, DeKalb, Clayton, Fulton, Bibb. But Muskogee and Richmond are the most similar to us, okay? So demographically, poverty rates, enrollment numbers, their costs per student are roughly $11,000 to $12,000 for last year. So I guess my concern is not, I don't want to say what you guys need. I know that you're going to do whatever you think is necessary for the population that's at the school, for whatever the needs are. I guess where my focus is going to have to be, and what my ask is going to be, is that we try to maintain a number that is relative to similar counties, similar districts to ours. And that's more meaningful because, you know, as we get close to budget season and we start having these talks about the development of the budget for next year, I don't want to be the person advocating for shorting any school or saying we don't need this or we don't need that. I trust you guys to do that, but let's just try to maintain a number that's, let's say, 19,000 a student, or keep it where it is. But even when I looked into federal, state, and local percentages for these other districts, we are far outpacing these other counties in local percentages. Like, we have 64% of our budget coming from local taxes. They have roughly 40. So I'm sure that there is something that we can do to be more reasonable when we start thinking about adding things like attendance clerks or extra APs. And that would be my only ask going forward. So I don't micromanage the positions, but I just say let's have a baseline that we're shooting for, at least, that's more reasonable for the community to get on board with. Thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Kachmar?
On that point, when we're looking at that data, I know in the past we've looked at it, and just let's make sure whether we and other counties are including East Blost or not.
It was not including
Okay.
capital improvements in the numbers that I found.
All right. In the past, I know that that's been a differentiator. So before I dive into the business stuff, two quick questions. Ms. Hall asked about deans of students. Are those part of the differentiation that y'all look at, or are they in lieu of APs, or?
Principals have added those at their discretion. We
Yeah,
don't
and they could
allocate.
potentially be part of that differentiation
It could be.
based on the needs of the school.
Okay. And then I know we kind of shortcutted your presentation, and you've got media clerks later. I know as a practical matter, media clerks do a lot of testing and technology responsibility. Is the thought being we need more help with those roles, so we'll add media clerks, or we actually need more media assistants and not check-the-box assistants on testing and okay.
No, so technology was one of the driving, because the assisting of technology throughout the school was one of the driving data points as to why we changed that formula.
Okay. So we're expanding the traditional role and job description of a media clerk to encompass testing, assessment, and technology management?
So technology management was the driving point for that. Now, they may assist on some other things, but the management of technology is why we were considering that change.
But how that's managed in the school is a school decision?
Right.
Okay. Back to the general points made earlier, I'm going to frame it the same way but a little differently. What I heard Dr. Bringman and Ms. Campbell saying was, give me the business case for what you're asking for.
Yep.
And over the last decade, administrative numbers in central office and in school sites have ballooned, nationally, but also in Chatham County. And Dr. Howard Hall referenced enrollment. All our enrollment projections, our FTE numbers are going to go down, not up. And that means our QBE formula assessment and award will go down. And so what's in these slides is 102.5 administrative positions. Now, some are more direct, like counselors, media clerks, and other subject specialists, whatever those are. And I know it sounds negative. I'm not sitting here saying I'm not going to support this or I am going to support this. But a lot of the AP stuff we're looking at, for example, is to impact school culture, discipline, but also some other duties like, training, professional development. But in past years, we've added dozens of training and professional development positions. So how are those impacted, if at all? And then I guess my general question is, tell me why it's better to add APs than to lower class sizes and add teachers. And if you reduce class size by 5 or 8 students, maybe the teacher can have a better impact on school culture and behavior, et cetera, in a much smaller classroom than in a larger classroom with more APs. And I get an AP is over a wing, a teacher's over a room. And I think part of it comes down to performance of the person in that role. I get that too. But if you're going to make a business case to add administrative positions when our enrollment projections are all heading downward, you got to show me this is the best solution to impact the outcomes we want and not direct classroom impact.
Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief since I've spoken already. I can say as a former principal, there's so many variables that we as board members will never be able to, we don't even fathom. And for one thing, when you say, as Mr. Cashmore said, well, let's reduce class size so that teachers have fewer kids, there's such a variety of skill and mastery in being a teacher. So I might be a teacher who can effectively and beautifully teach 30 students, whereas there's another teacher who has trouble with 12. So there's so much complexity to, what goes on. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'd love to hear, and none of us have said this yet, what are the schools saying? What are our principals and counselors, what do they have to say about all this? What do they feel their schools need? Because they're there in the fray every day. We're kind of the grand masters, on the outside. What do they have to say? What do they say they need? And how can they use Dr. Brinkman's model, show us how this makes a difference? I just think that would be wonderful if we start at the grassroots rather than start from us and go down. The only thing, Ms. Campbell, about comparing us to other Georgia counties, that's not a high bar to me.
Agreed.
I want to see what the best schools in the nation are doing. What is their formula? How are they, doing? So that we can see a progression upwards and not just say, we're doing what all the other Georgia counties are doing. So that would just be my comment on that.
Thank you,
Campbell,
and I
and
will note that in talking with a select group of principals, these roles did rise to the top as we started asking questions around the follow-through on certain things and how can we help make your school better? How can we ramp up instruction? How can we help manage students better? How can we make attendance record-keeping better? How can we manage our technology better? How can we actually provide counseling to students in small groups more frequently? because so much things are, like counselors managing threat assessments and suicide assessments and stuff like that, all the other things. So this did bubble up from grassroots of talking with principals about what they're experiencing every day.
Ms. Grabowski?
So I, in one of my notes, have made the same comment, or as Mr. Katchmar, like, is this the best place to put our resources versus closer to the classroom? I would really like to better understand why this is the preferred approach. We have, and maybe a map or a chart would be helpful, because we have deans, coaches, APs, I mean, all of these people that are in our schools, and I would love a comprehensive picture of everyone that is working in a school who's not a teacher, to really, and understanding the roles that each of these positions have in supporting our students. Because I feel like we have all of these people floating up here and bouncing around, and I know that they're there to support, but is that where that support needs to be, or does it need to be closer to the classroom and closer to the students, where those support people are able to then build those relationships also with the students? And maybe that's happening. I just don't have a clear picture because we are introducing all of these new elements. So just understanding kind of that whole network and the intention behind how those different positions are overlapping would be super helpful. I will say to Dr. Watts, I'm glad to hear we're kind of going toward the pathway of helping to articulate better what the APs are doing. I think that could be really helpful for parents, because right now I think parents, you know, if they can't resolve an issue with a teacher, they go straight to the principal. But if there's an intermediary, it would be really helpful. So I'm glad to hear we're doing that. I do have some comments about the media clerk positions, but I don't know if we want to wait until we get to that portion of the. Okay.
I think I still had some people that wanted to talk on where we're at right now. Ms. Campbell and then Mr. Moss.
Yeah, this will be fast. I agree with Ms. Grabowski. I think it would be really helpful if we sort of had a job description goal in mind for each position in the school, because based on what Mr. Katchmar was saying, and I see this too in the numbers, I am for comparing ourselves to the best. Absolutely. I am here for that all day. In fact, I'll get some of those numbers. I was planning on sending this info out later anyways in an email. So I'll get those as well. Because literacy, third grade literacy, was pretty much the same throughout the districts I compared. But when I look at, to Mr. Katchmar's point, the ballooning of admin, in 2015, general administration was at 26 FTEs, and in 2024, we're at 108.5. So I guess back to Ms. Grabowski's point, it would be nice to just know, okay, so what is general admin? What's school admin? That sounds pretty self-explanatory, APs, principals, okay. And then what is business admin? Because general admin, as we can see, has ballooned tremendously. So again, not to micromanage, I trust you guys to do what's best for students and for outcomes. But some KPIs, because Dr. Watts has been great about bringing that to the district, and the transparency, I think, is wonderful. So maybe we could add something like that with some job descriptions, what these things are, and then we'll trust you guys to do it, and we'll just say, but can we get it down per, cost per student a little bit, where we're more in line with what's reasonable for taxpayers, et cetera? Thanks.
Mr. Moss?
Okay, I'll try to keep this very brief because I'm going to be talking a lot later. First of all, on discipline, and I'm sort of getting into what the board does and what staff does. I think on the discipline issue, I think this board needs to relook at our discipline policies. I think there's some firming up that we need to do. I don't think that we're, based on what is allowed to happen, I don't think the students and parents are getting the message of what is allowable and what is unacceptable, and whether we're going to have consequences or not. So that's that. On what Dr. Bringman said, I absolutely agree. You know, we need to be result oriented. You know, I spoke last year, and you know, I know people looked at me like I had three heads, but you know, when you look at merit-based, you know, pay, if people are doing their jobs, it's great. If they're not, we need to move on. So, and the ballooning of those positions, I'm with Dr. I already given you a doctorate, Ms. Grabowski. But I agree with Ms. Grabowski and Mr. Kachmar, and I think everyone agrees. You know, at the end of the day, the people that we, of course, want to take care of everyone, but we want to take care of our teachers. And we want to give them the best environment to work in and make it as easy for them as possible. And if it means, you know, reducing class size, absolutely. I would much rather hire more teachers than more administrators. So that was it for now.
Yes, Dr. Howard Hall.
Now, from listening to you, you consulted with the principals. Like the song, you got to give the people what they want.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you're consulting with the principals, and they're telling us what they need. And until we have worked in the trenches in these schools and understand the importance of school culture, you cannot get anything done in chaos. These principals are pleading and asking for help. It looks one way on paper, but it's another way. You walk the halls of these schools. And I'm trusting what these principals are asking for. If they're asking for additional APs to help them monitor those halls, I'm reminded of a principal who's retired now. She had a bullhorn, and some people may know who I'm talking about. And her thing was, you got to have order in this building. Before you teach anything, you must have order. So we're going to have to really listen to what these principals are saying. We have concerns and issues within these schools, and they need help. Reducing the class sizes and everything, we've been doing that for the past 50 years. But until you have order, you're going to have issues.
Dr. Barnes, keep going. I know that was a long talk, but I think it hits on a lot of positions, so you don't have to spend a ton trying to get us through the rubrics, but these are all discussions we need to be having.
All right. So, counselors, the driving force behind this is to become more in alignment with Godot standards, and also the guidance and alignment from the American School Counselor Association. This will help bring us up closer to baseline around those standards. When we look at the lower grades, the developmental needs for elementary schools and those that are in K-8s, you know, in the elementary span, those developmental needs are much different than the needs of students in the secondary. And so we want to make sure that we are supporting students from a social development aspect of things. And then once they get to the upper grades, we're supporting them in a more college and career pathway to help, you know, guide their thinking, provide the right advice to them as they matriculate towards graduation and think about what's going to happen with them after high school. Now, there are several things that happen within the school that are competing priorities with the counselor at this time. Many students have an array of needs and need that support of the counselor, which also competes with the aforementioned things that I discussed. And so when we have schools that have one counselor with a caseload of 600 students that have an array of needs, that creates a fundamental challenge to make sure that we're providing a well-rounded, joyous, and rigorous experience for students in school.
I think it's important to note here that while you see additional FTE, the net change is only one FTE. It's only one position. So this is a reallocation of the district level positions down to the school level, not necessarily adding new positions overall. So the net change is only one. And I will say also, yesterday I spent another day in Student Senate. The need here really comes from the listen and learning that we are doing with our Student Senate. And at the high school level, I wish some of you could be in the room so that you could understand what the needs are when you have a counselor that's responsible for scheduling, FAFSA, helping kids go to college, and the social emotional needs. And of course, we're not talking about middle and elementary schools, but if we were going to start somewhere with this, for me, it would be the high school. And that comes directly from what I am hearing from kids.
And I do want to point out that some of the positions, for instance, in the current budget, we added 24 counselors this budget year. But there are a number of positions, counselor positions, that are currently budgeted in the central office administration where they should be out of school. So that's skewing the budget for central administration where it's actually a school position. So that we're correcting that part of the budget in this process, but these people are already assigned to a school, and we're just trying to, just so happen the formula balance out where we're only adding one position in total.
Ms. Hall?
I just want to mention to what Dr. Watts was saying. I was fortunate. I grew up in Westchester County, New York. So we had in high school not just a counselor, we had a guidance counselor. The guidance counselor's job was just to see that we got to the college that was best for us. The counselor dealt with my not being able to get along with my parents, when I'm 16. So some of these things that we're talking about, we have changed, our whole country has changed because of the dynamics of being a child in America now as opposed to, 40 years ago.
Yep.
And it calls for a different mindset. And if we're invited to come to your student senate meetings, I definitely would like to hear.
They're coming here.
Oh,
eventually.
okay.
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
And
So,
in another district I was in, we had college and career readiness counselors, and that's all they focused on was just college and career, the transition. They didn't do any other regular counseling. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at how you assign counselors. But there's a great need at the high school.
Ms. Campbell and then Dr. Tanya Howard-Hall.
I just wanted to say, I had a question about how it was the projected budget impact was so low, but we had all the additional FTEs, but Dr. Watts addressed that, and thank you. That is great that you reorganized and that we're just shifting around based on the needs that you listened to, especially amongst students. So I just wanted to say thank you, and that was great.
It's also at the high school level when it comes to athletes. I know we have athletic directors or ADs, but that needs to be in a more of a counseling role, because when my son was in high school, I had to do all of the legwork with making sure he qualifies, to meet the needs to play college football, the SAT scores and all of those. And our schools have many athletes, and some of them are phenomenal, and they don't receive a scholarship because they haven't gotten the guidance that they needed starting the first freshman year in school to meet the requirements to go to college. So maybe that's a counseling role / athletic director could be something to consider.
Keep moving.
Okay, so the next part of this discussion is secretaries, and of course, I want to remind us that this is the baseline allotment for secretaries, which we certainly can consider, a differentiated approach in the next iteration of this. But in terms of a baseline allotment, the big change here is really taking 0.5s and making them wholes. What we're seeing is that a secretary could be split between a school And so what happens is we end up getting a backlog of record keeping and things of that nature. So this is more than just at the front office and answering the phone. This is all the other things that secretaries do as well. We know that attendance is one of the things that we're really hammering down hard on. And so instead of adding an attendance clerk, we looked at adding the secretary that can do more things, and then we assigned them also the duty of attendance, the duties of attendance clerk to make sure that record keeping is accurate and all the things that go along with the truancy policy and attendance policy. And media clerks. So the media clerk conversation really comes up to that role of the media clerk, the management and the support of the overall technological aspects of our school. We're actually getting more devices in schools. Schools are one-to-one, the overall management of those, and the assistance of the media specialist. This person will definitely help that. Also, what it does is it removes the 0.5s and we just round it up. The 0.5 actually either is going to be shared in an A-day, B-day schedule, or in some cases 1 week here and another week at another school, and that becomes very convoluted. So this really rounds up the 0.5 to be a whole position.
Ms. Grabowski?
Just quickly on the secretaries, I'm glad that you looked at a way to creatively integrate the attendance into that versus creating a whole new position, so thank you for taking that look. On the media clerks, so we have this really heavy focus on literacy, as we should, and our media clerks are perfectly positioned to help guide that in each of our schools. The skill set for technology could potentially be quite different than would be for a literacy leader. So is this the best place to put technology under our media clerks? Is that the best use of their talents and the resource that they can provide to the schools to also be having to mess with a broken computer and computer updates and making sure that parents have their insurance and all of those really more technical types of tasks, in particular in the beginning of the year and the end of the year, when all they can do is make sure all the computers are updated, make sure the cows are working, and all of those types of, is this really the best use of our highly trained media clerks to be focusing on dealing with computers? Or do we need to rethink how we are dealing with technology, even maybe at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, we outsource some of that. We get someone to come in and deal with that, because that takes weeks of their time to be dealing with computers, and I just question if that's really the best use of, and maybe it is. I mean, again, I don't want to micromanage, but I don't want us to think just because that's how we started doing it, that's necessarily the best way to do it. Is it worth
can I say
rethinking
something?
that role?
Can I say something? Ramon Ray, Human Resources. Ms. Grabowski, I just want to make sure we're clear on this particular role. I think the former media specialist, which we call library media technology specialist, that's the certified person that is the professional person in the media center. The media clerk is the clerk of the media center. So I was going to make sure we're talking about the same person. Sound like you were talking about the library media technology specialist.
I am, thank you. And
Okay.
I thought that we were looking to take some of the pressure off
Well,
of them.
that's part of this, is allowing those lower clerical tasks, whether it's the insurance, whether it's the inventory, we have taking some of that off of the library media technology specialist is the thought with that.
So the technology piece would go to the media clerks.
Some
Now,
of it would.
some of it would, 'cause right now-
Some of the tasks that you're talking about, like taking up devices, passing out
The
devices.
managerial aspects of things.
Okay.
Managing that aspect of it would go to the clerk, which takes the burden off of the
media.
actual
Okay.
professional.
But remember, what's happening in a lot of the schools is there's only a 0.5 person there. They may
Right.
be there one week, not there the next. And so it provides consistency. I can rely on this person to do this task as opposed to, I really can't let it go because this person is only here sometime.
Okay,
That's what this does. It makes a lot of those 0.5s whole.
okay. So that they would have someone there
Every
to
day,
do that
Monday through Friday.
full-time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Dr. Howard Hall?
And also, if you look at the title, it says media clerk. The keyword media, the days of the Dewey Decimal System that's gone. You know, once upon a time, you would go to the library, not the media center, but the library, and someone will assist you with the books. But now with this technology, it's technology oriented. So that is why there's so much tied to technology when they're in the media center, because it's no longer the library, it's the media center. So there's a lot of work to be done using those computers and those laptops and those cows.
But I hope that our LMTS can maybe also encourage our kids to not be so reliant on technology as well and use some old-fashioned books.
All right, 6A, other subject specialists. In this area, the focus, the impact is zero, and Mr. Jackson can provide some insights on that. But the focus of this role really is to be able to provide electives at the K-8 and the middle grades level, that there is true, what I would say, feeder pattern, those prerequisite courses such as chorus and band, that students are being exposed to those things in middle school prior to going to high school. And so we want to make sure not just to build our high school programs, but to give students a well-rounded education and being able to give every school and every student that's in that school the same curriculum offerings that happens across the district. I think it would be in the best interest of students to be exposed to as many of the arts as possible, and that we not restrict them because we don't offer that particular course in a middle school, and therefore they can't take it as a prerequisite in a high school. So that's what this budget actually is about.
Mr. Moss?
Okay, so when I looked at the, what we got in our email yesterday, and predictably, the first thing I looked at was what we were allocating for course teachers. I was not happy to see that we are really only allocating for high school. And it's interesting because you just said that we would have the kids exposed to this early so that they're not just getting in high school, but we are not allocating until high school.
Correct. So it's specific in the high school. These positions here, so in the middle school, we may have an interest in art, band, PE, a foreign language, et cetera. This gives some flexibility in the middle school to be able to offer other electives as well.
Okay.
I think what you're trying to say is you want it to be a part of the chorus, to be a part of the base allocation.
Absolutely.
The approach that we are taking as a district is that in middle school, we are allocating additional positions. We would want the middle school principals, K-8 principals, to survey kids to see where there is interest. So if there's a high interest among students in foreign language, they could allocate one of these positions to foreign language. If there's a high interest in orchestra, they could allocate the position to orchestra. We were looking at it from driving from student interest, and what you're talking about is saying, this is the base allocation. Every school and every student would have the opportunity
Just like they
to
have for
have
band.
chorus. I get it.
And Mr. Moss, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to ask some of my veteran board members that may remember. I think the conversation goes back to a period of time when the board made a decision about fifth grade band, and we decided to remove that from the elementary schools. And at the same time, there were some conversations that the academic side had with the middle school principals. And it was kind of more of a recommendation from the middle school principals because it was difficult doing the schedules. But it goes back many, many years ago. I believe we had Coursera once upon a time, but it was the decision that was done many, many years ago not to separate it and just leave it up to the principals.
But,
And when
but in this, we do have an allocation for band.
Yes.
We do.
Okay, so,
And I will say, Mr. Moss, as a part of the next iteration of strategic planning, when we do our next strategic plan, one thing that will be such a driving piece for this that I feel is most important is that every student have a baseline experience. What we have to do as a board and what we have to do as a staff is we have to decide what is that baseline experience. Now, I hear you saying core should be a part of the baseline experience, right? Some other person may believe that a foreign language should be a part of the baseline. But once we define as a district, what is the baseline experience, regardless if you go to school in the north, the south, the east, or the west, you get the baseline, then I think we can revisit whether we make chorus mandatory. But right now, we've given our schools a lot of flexibility,
so, okay, yeah.
and that's
And
debatable.
Yes, and I did warn you guys earlier that I was going to talk about this a lot. So, we're concerned about literacy and we're concerned about math. In chorus, kids get both, and I'm going to give you an example. One measure of music, if the time signature is 4/4, that means that a measure gets 4 beats. If a quarter note gets 1 beat, if a dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats, if a half note gets 2 beats, and a whole note gets 4 beats. Give me the combinations that you could have that equals 4. Now combine that with the fact that in chorus, the kids have to read. So I don't understand if you're concerned about literacy and math, why you would eliminate the one thing that combines both.
It's not an elimination, though. We
Well,
haven't
I mean,
Okay.
you not use it. And the last thing I'm going to say is, and I've said this a lot, and Ms. Grabowski will back me on this. So I spoke with Bud Peterson, who was the president of Georgia Tech a few years ago. 60% of the kids that get accepted to Georgia Tech have a music background. Music is not just an extra. It's not just if the principal feels like it. I believe in a great school system. And it's interesting because, Dr. Watts, you come from Houston. Texas, music is everything in Texas. Music is everything in a lot. You talk about the successful school systems, music is essential. So I guess this is the cross I'll die on, but I'm kind of flummoxed. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
You don't have to be sorry for having feelings. We're allowed to emote. Mr. Katchmar, and we're going to try to wrap up pretty quickly. The superintendent has a presser.
Yeah, I was wondering why the media was excited about our staffing allocation headcount. So, Mr. Moss, are you focusing on chorus or on music? And before you answer, because I agree with you generally, and I was here when we had the debate about fifth grade band, and that was back when we had a one-pager with 5 items that said pick 3 to cut. and the rest of us would be like, we have a $500 million budget. Are you kidding? That's it? But that's how things were presented at the time. As a board, we can make a policy decision of we believe art and music should start at kindergarten and be in every grade or not. And so that's our role, and I 100% agree with you. We should make those decisions, and I lean towards requiring art and music. When I grew up, I went to schools everywhere, public, private, military, whatever. We had to do art, we had to do music, but you got to pick within it. You don't want me in chorus, but you want me playing guitar or clarinet. You had to pick something
Right.
music-related.
Music is broad.
Broad. So if you're saying I require chorus, we can talk about that. If it's we should require music, and you get to pick your pathway within music or within, and I see music and art as separate. Art, paint, draw, act, write, whatever. I see them as separate, and both should be required. But so I generally agree with the concept of reading, writing, arithmetic, yes, but art and music, PE.
We
And
just
there's
need to
various things you can do with
define. We need
PE
to
as well.
define what it
We need to
is.
define what it is and decide when we want to start requiring it. And then
Exactly.
within that, I would give kids choices, chorus, music, whatever we could do in music, same thing with art. What I don't agree with is letting schools decide by surveys. Because if you surveyed my son in middle school, we would have had the best Lego robotics and video game program. We would have had no PE, we would have had no music, no math, no reading. So I get you have to respond to demand, but sometimes the tail's wagging the dog, and it's not getting us where we want to be.
I meant what you said. It's saying that music is the baseline experience, but giving kids choices within that category. And that's where the surveying would come in.
But you have to be consistent. So if you survey kids 1 year and they're like, we really want to do jazz, and then you offer jazz the next year, and it takes a year to get up and running, and then in year 2 we get competent, and in year 3 we get good.
And then we rank.
But by then, the new series of kids is like, you know what, we want to do
Orchestra.
But you have something like Coastal Middle School, known for its jazz program because it's been consistent. You have to be consistent and get good at it, and that gets younger kids excited about, wow, I can't wait to join this in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade.
That's true.
If we just start and stop based on
Interest.
a whim that year, I don't think it's as effective.
Thann you.
Ms. Hall, and then Dr.
Okay.
Tanya Howard Hall, and then I'm going to wrap us up because we've got things backed up against us, and I'll make a comment on that later.
Okay. Very quickly, I'm sure we've all heard the adage, music is a universal language, and that's very true. And I'm going to support what Mr. Moss was saying because chorus is a very general introduction to music. You don't have to have the makings of a fine violinist or a flutist or, music comes to you in a general nature. Either you might be very good at it or not, but chorus is an easy way. I remember, Dr. Brewen, we did HMS Pinafore in 4th grade, and I remember that to this day. And I was part of the chorus. We are the sisters and the cousins and the aunts. That is important, and it does impact your academic success. So I agree that having chorus in middle school will lead to us having some schools come to perform for us on board meetings that are great choruses in 11th grade because they started in 6th grade. You can't just begin a chorus in 9th grade and, get great. So I will definitely support having chorus as a basic introduction to music. And then you can specialize, and it's equitable because there's so many instrumental musics where my kid was good in viola, so I was able to get her viola lessons on the side so she could get really good. All the kids don't have that opportunity and that access. Chorus is something that everyone can enjoy, and just grow to love music through. Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, and I also agree with Mr. Moss. We're going to have to go beyond the scope of choice schools. If I am a 8th grader at Mercer, and I'm interested in attending Savannah Arts, I deserve to have the same basic foundation of music as those students at Garrison. So, Mr. Moss, I agree.
Mark this
Common
day.
ground, common ground. Love it.
The media's here to record it, too.
So I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you to the district staff. I know we've had a lot of maybe slightly uncomfortable conversations when you bring forward a plan, and we have lots of thoughts. But understand this is the earliest we've really had these discussions in a budget cycle. This is how it should be happening. So we need to continue having things presented to us as soon as possible with as much detail so that we can either agree or disagree, so that you can go back to the board and either chop it, rearrange it, engage with us outside of committee meetings. I would definitely ask that we get our materials earlier. I'm not putting that on the super. The super's going to come at y'all and say, get it to us earlier. We know these meetings are happening. Get us the stuff earlier so that some of these questions could have been emails that you were already ready to answer. And then moving forward, this meeting needs to have a larger allotment. I don't want to stifle the discussion that's going to lead our budget process because we have a tight schedule for other district staff. So at least an hour and a half moving forward. That's on me for it just always being 9 to 10, but
And I've also added, well, we should be polling the board for a couple of board workshops too.
amen.
We'll connect to this meeting to make it a little bit more robust in time. So you all should be getting an invitation to give us a response on a couple of those.
Yeah, and please, district staff, do not take all of our thoughts as criticism. It's, I know, I'm just making sure. It's the generative process that Mr. Katchmar summed up with, we used to get a one-pager. This is so much more transparent to us, transparent to families and constituents, and I just wish more of them would come and engage at this process in board meetings and in committee meetings to help guide us as their elected officials in the budgetary process. So please, constituents, engage with us so that we can engage with the district staff so that the budget is made according to what everybody in Savannah Chatham County is wanting. Thank you. I adjourn.
You wearing that on Monday?
Yeah, I got an extra one to go.